by phone and video conference as a result of Governor Lee's stay-at-home order. And we are recording it as well. Is that correct, Amity?
Yes, sir. Recording has started.
Thank you. Today we'll have an update on the RFA's commission-directed staff to issue to hire an executive director and project staff, as well as a presentation from Drew Harpole, the Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Education. Drew, it's good to see you. Thanks for being with us. If you recall, Drew could not join us during our organization meeting because he had a commitment to the General Assembly. Drew is also joined by Rick Zadd, the Senior Director of Procurement and Logistics for the Department of Education, who will give us an overview of setting up space and procuring the necessary services for the commission. Before we get started, I'd like to take a roll of committee members. Commissioner Cisnet.
He is on the line. He's working on his volume.
I see him. So he is here. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And this is Commissioner Griscom. I am now serving on this committee until we get a new appointment from the governor, and then we will revisit the commission, this committee. Any other commission member who is on the WebEx, would you please announce yourself at this time?
Terrence Patterson is also on the WebEx, and I believe that Chris Richards used the public telephone line to listen to the meeting today.
Great. Yep.
I am here. Hello, everyone. This is Terrence.
Hi, Terrence.
And Chris, glad you're here as well.
Thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead.
Tom, just for good of the order, I'd also just like to announce some other people on the line. So Steve Canavero is on the line. You've all met him as one of our consultants. Also joining us today for the first time is Chris Reynolds, who will be awarded a small contract to staff the committees of the commission. Of course, Tess Stovall, all know quite well. Dr. Eve Carney, you have met before in your meetings. And then Chanel Tyler is joining us from the Attorney General's office as General Counsel. And then Janet Kleinfelter is also joining us from the Attorney General's office. And Janet will be making sure that we maintain our public records and other aspects of the commission until the commission has General Counsel as well. And then, of course, Drew and Rick are joining us as well.
Hey, Amby, let me particularly say thank you, Chanel. I had an opportunity, but I guess about 2 weeks ago now you can actually see me, so you know who I am. But we knew with a little bit of a delay that we needed to go ahead and reach out to the governor's office to have an interim legal counsel, because there was some work that Terrence and his committee will be doing next week where we really needed a lawyer who was assigned to us during this interim period of time until we are able to identify someone who will serve this permanently with the commission. So Chanel, thank you. We really do appreciate your willingness to work with us and help us during this period of time.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Drew and to Rick, whose screen we've been looking at, so I can hardly wait. Drew, for you to walk us through this. So welcome, and we are now turned over to you.
I appreciate it, and thank you all so much for having me. Sorry I missed the main meeting. The legislature requested that we give some testimony on the budget, so now I'm here. And I hope not to bore you too much with the lovely intricacies of budget. So a couple of things that I wanted to go over just in terms of high-level stuff. One is just some common terms. We use some terms very differently than anywhere else I've encountered in terms of the way that we talk about certain items in state government budgets. I then also wanted to look over the budget, the very high-level version of the budget with each of you so you can see it, see what it's composed of, and see how little is actually embedded in it, and then finally review the fiscal note and some of the assumptions that were embedded therein. In the middle of all of this, because it's going to come up Rick is going to be able to talk to us some about the procurement elements. So common budget terms. First of all, you'll hear a couple of terms depending on who you're talking to, above the line and below the line. This refers to personnel expenses, that's above the line, and below the line is all operational non-personnel expenses. I do want to specifically call it equity because this is the most bizarre usage of the word that I've encountered. Just generally, equity here is specifically referring to the budgeted amounts for salary only, not salary and benefits, for salary only. In the land of state budget, you have a specific amount that is budgeted for salary that you cannot exceed. It's taken as a point in time, and it is the total amount that everyone's salary at a given point adds up to. So payroll savings, for instance, don't count towards this. A lot of times people bank on payroll savings to help make total budget. In this case, equity is just focused on a point in time total salary addition of everyone working for the group at the time. Work program. The work program is the official, maintained by the Department of Finance and Administration, category level budget. So it has your above the line and below the line amounts, it has your personnel and operational amounts. It also has various revenue funding streams. For the most part for you right now, it's state funds. As you onboard the charter schools, you will begin to see more in the other category. I'm sure that Tess has spoken to you all about what some of that looks like so far. The other big term that I wanted to frame for you is allotment code. It's a 5-digit number that every state government organization has assigned to it.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. The allotment code is a 5-digit number representing a division's place in the budget. So when you look up at the governor's budget book, the Charter School Commission is budget number 331.56. This is just a number that it is assigned. It's a quick way to find it within the governor's budget book. And any budget publications that come out after. I can guarantee you will find it much faster by searching for 331.56, 331.56, than by trying to find charter school in the major budget publications. That's all for this. Yes, the budget. So, yay, all the lines. I tried to be fancy. Too many, too much. So there's 10 positions. The Charter School Commission currently has 10 positions budgeted for it. When I mentioned equity, you have both a salary cap and a position cap. You can only hire up to 10 full-time positions. The equity budget, as it's been established, is $664,300. You have a total personnel budget, so the total personnel would include benefits of $840,200, and the total operational budget, so everything else, is $111,400. I will say from a budgeting perspective, you can typically, if you need to, move money from above the line, so your personnel budget, to below the line, your operational budget. You do not tend to be able to move things from your operational to above, to your personnel. It's just the nature of state government. We're looking to keep government small.
Drew, quick question. I know that the commission also had some one-time expense operational money. It was $250. Was it $250 each year or $250 in a rollover?
So it is $250 with rollover. The idea being that once charter schools have been brought on, that $250 is now replaced by the authorizer fee.
So it's not $500, it's $250.
It's $250.
Okay.
And that $250 is embedded in this number.
Okay.
So I'll turn it over to Rick for a moment to talk about procurement and some of the more interesting facets of getting things.
Thank you, Drew. So starting with office space, something you all will need in the near future. The good news is Amity has already kicked off a piece of this by engaging with Stream on your behalf. So basically finding new office space always goes through a different agency. It's part of Department of General Services. It's called State of Tennessee Real Estate Asset Management. They have this form called a SAR. It is a space action request. It's mostly used as a worksheet to help determine what your square footage needs are. You identify how many hard-walled offices, how many cubicles, what kind of meeting space, waiting space, all those kinds of things. That goes into it. You also, for budgeting purposes, and this number was actually just updated after I sent these slides. I heard back confirmation from Stream. Nashville, instead of being 18 per square foot, is up to $22.50 per square foot. The good news is, though, that is more than just your rent. You could also argue that that's still pretty far below market rate for Nashville, especially for the quality office space we get. But that includes maintenance, utilities, the cost of moving. So if you ever end up in a space and then need to move to a different Stream space, that's included in the fee. Lease management and the actual furniture that comes with that space too. So a lot tied into that $22.50. Basically, a representative from Stream will work with whoever wants to kind of be the lead on this to show you available properties that you can choose from, arrange the logistics of the move-in, and obviously you're welcome to let my team know if you ever have any questions or just need an extra set of hands to pitch in evaluating these things too.
And Rick, before we transition to the next slide, I will say that we have identified space in the Davy Crockett Tower, which is directly across the street from the Capitol building, and it is on the same floor as the State Board of Education, which will provide for a nice transition just in duties and technical assistance and coaching and mentoring for the Charter Commission staff. So we'll talk about that here towards the end as well.
Great. Copiers, so something you'll need once you get into the space, and something you can even prep for once you're getting ready to move into the space. I have a hyperlink on several of these slides. You notice that a lot of these will start with the same sentence starter, complete a request here, and the TDO team will order that for you. Truly feel free to use that link as often as the need arises. So basically, when you're ready to pull the trigger, get that order going, if you complete that form, it just engages a member of my team to actually get the ordering process going for you. In terms of budgeting, though, assume a $30 to a $70 per month rental fee for either a black and white or color printer, scanner, copier. Pretty wide range, obviously, but so much of that depends on what tier of machine, how you need it to be, what kind of add-ons are associated with it. So we can walk you through all those details when you actually get a little bit closer to identifying your needs. Just engage my team with that link and we'll take it from there.
So, Amity, let me ask this question to you first. So when, in looking at this slide on supplies, can we get a basic feel for probably what we're going to need from talking to Tess and the team that's in place right now?
Yep, we've actually been modeling the commission stand-up budget against the state board's current budget for supplies, fees, printers, office space, all of that, because it's a similar size staff. So that is what we're doing our modeling off of.
Okay, so you all will have that, and it's just a matter of deciding when we need to go ahead and make the request. Is that?
That's right. So Rick will tell you that I did try to order computers this week, and apparently that's not a priority in a pandemic. So we are definitely trying to be as proactive as possible so that when the ED gets here, he or she does not have to spend their time on this type of activity, that a lot of it will be done for them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And allow me to clarify, it's not that it wasn't my priority.
I know, that's right. Because Rick's very good at customer service.
Yeah,
really,
any computer we've tried to order in the past 3 weeks has been shut down. Question, is this for COVID-19 response or not?
That's right. The odds were not in my favor is what he kind of told me. And it's out of his control too, by the way.
But yeah, supplies will work the same way. So once you all get more settled, you've got that space ready to go. We have a place to actually ship to and deliver these things. You can just fill out this link. This is for all your general stuff, pens, notebooks, staplers, you name it, all the basics that go into setting up an office for the first time. If you want to get very specific in that, you can go to staples.com and send us some links to things that you want in particular. If you're less concerned about exactly what you want, you can just fill out that request and say, hey, can you order us, enough pens, paper, and so on to cover a 10-person office. We can kind of take it from there too. We may ask you a few clarifying questions, but we're happy to try to interpret. Delivery of those kinds of products is a lot faster, typically 2 to 5 business days, depending on what it is, and also assuming no major supply chain disruptions in the near to medium future. Finally, technology. So same thing, really anything you all need from a procurement standpoint. That link is on each slide for a reason. Really feel free to use that every time. My team will then order those devices through a portal that's called ServiceNow. That's the way state employees make requests to the Strategic Technology Solutions Division. That is where you get phones, laptops, accessories, and any kind of tech service from, or not any kind, but many types of pre-existing software. These scenarios, you have far less leeway though in what you get. Instead of picking from an entire Staples catalog, you're picking from a small amount of pre-approved items. We will present you with those options though, should you're interested. And delivery, 1 to 2 weeks can be pretty common, although given the whole COVID-19 response, that may be a little longer, but hopefully by the time we're getting these, which is mid to late June, Amity, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Yep.
should hopefully be back to normal.
Yep.
So, let me ask the same question again. I assume, is it safe to assume that same thing like with the supplies, that you all are looking at that and sort of lining out what's needed to run the type of office we're talking about? Is that correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, most of this was on schedule to be completed during the month of April pre-pandemic. So we're just standing down on some of the ordering. However, I will be completing the space form for you all to review to go ahead and procure the space in Davy Crockett. And then we'll follow, of course, for the request for the copiers, because those are things that we could do essentially now.
And then finally, web services. So the most common one here is WebEx accounts. If you'll be hosting those kinds of online meetings, you'll want at least one person on staff to have an account for that. Another tool we have access to is FormStack. If you decide that you have complex surveying needs, you may want an account for that. Think of it as a very robust version of Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. Accounts activation, that stuff is much faster. They're predictable on-state contract monthly service fees, and they can typically be active in 1 to 2 business days. That's it. Short story, use the link. Don't feel like you're overusing it. Come to us for everything and we'll make sure you get it.
And I just want to provide some context. I know that Eddie had some questions around acceptable use of technology, acceptable use of state machinery. And I just wanted to provide the context around that is all governed by state rules that are pre-existing. Can you just talk a little bit about that, Rick or Drew? Meaning the commission doesn't have to write its own manual.
I'm happy to take that.
Thanks.
So if you go, and if you're curious what all of these policies look like, the Department of Human Resources, the statewide Department of Human Resources, has posted most of those policies online on their natural website, on their normal website. So they have policies on acceptable technology usage, on conflict of interest, and just on being good stewards of government funds or of being good government employees posted there. There's a ton of policies posted that cover most of the bases that exist. For other items, if necessary, you have a little bit of control to do some more local, but depending on whether that rises to the level of a rule, it would of course need to go through the formal rulemaking process versus an internal procedure, which is just about governing the internal processes of the commission.
Right. Thanks, Drew. Eddie, does that answer most of your questions around that issue?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I had, having served on the Information Systems Council, when we heard confidential reports from the comptroller's office as it related to different agencies, there were a lot of times where certain protocols weren't being followed that I wanted to make sure that we were thinking ahead just to stay out of the comptroller's crosshairs, especially as it relates to some of the Edison passwords, you know, because we will have confidential information on students, making sure all of that and the policies and things that we would need to be thinking about in place on the front end so that we weren't trying to plug that hole down the line.
Good point.
Absolutely. And some of those policies specifically on the IT, STS now has a formal full ISP that governs a lot of those things for all state agencies. So taking that and interpreting it for the specifics of the commission can be something that we look at. One of the things that I wanted to cover was fiscal note position assumptions. So when the law for the charter school was passed, a specific fiscal note accompanied it. And so these are the assumptions that was made in that fiscal note. They were just assumptions. You all can feel free to vary from it. However, this is where the total dollar amount that your budget was derived from came from. The first is, here are your 10 positions. And I've listed out just the position title and what was included in the fiscal note, the count, the number of them. So this assumed 1 director of schools, 1 attorney, 1 EdCon 4, 3 EdCon 3s, 1 EdCon 2, an accountant, and 2 admins, along with their associated salaries, the benefits, the total per person, and there are gray boxes over the rest, but there is a total there. I don't know if anyone else sees those lovely gray boxes. There they are. There's the totals.
Is that better?
That's better. That's lovely. Okay. And that number adds up to that total 840,000 that we looked at a little bit earlier. So this is what the anticipated salaries for each of these roles would be. That was also predicated on, Amity, if you wanted to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I will say though, having already created the job description for the executive director, which in this slide is the director of schools, the salary range for the executive director goes all the way up to, I believe, $164,000.
So can we go back to that just a second? Because that's what I wanted to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
So from your earlier points, Drew, do we have the ability in here, let's just take the executive director. Can we work within these numbers? We've got to live with the total. I've got that. But are we able let's take education consultant too, and could we say, okay, we're going to lower that a little bit because we need to move additional funds up into the ED? How does that work?
You absolutely can do that.
Okay.
A couple of things to think about in doing that is every job here listed, and these were the classifications that were assumed in the fiscal note. But every position is going to have a formal classification. You can again find all of the classifications that currently exist on DOHR's website. If the band that you want to move it to falls outside the formally established band, we will have to change the classification of a position. But otherwise, you can feel free to move pretty flexibly between these. The numbers next to the positions typically indicate the level of complexity, and that has to do with DOHR trying to norm different positions to different job duties across state government so that we make sure that everyone who's doing this type of duty is roughly making the same across state government. The level of success varies with being able to do that. But you do have the ability to move the money between these. So if you wanted to say pay the EdCon 3s $10,000 less and pay the director of schools $30,000 more, that is absolutely an option.
Or we could also potentially decide we don't, starting off, need 10 positions, or let's say we need 9. And we can move that money out of a 10th position to reallocate, correct?
So that gets a little bit more complicated
Okay.
For the reasons on the next slide.
Okay.
Now we're getting into how we define equity. So I wanted to put those here as well. This is kind of where that equity budget comes up against, and that's that $664,000 that you're playing with. One of the rules about positions and how we calculate equity is that vacancies, if you choose not to fill a position, it's held at the minimum of the band that it's in. So if you choose, say, not to fill one of the admin positions, whatever that position, the lowest salary amount is, that's what it's going to hold no matter how else it's calculated. So you can take a lot of the money, not quite all of it.
Not all of it. Does that make sense, Tom?
Yeah, it does. But I mean, I'm assuming this is a place, Amity, where you all can sort of help us work through this. Because clearly, just knowing the executive director thing, where we already are outside that band, that we're probably going to have to we have to sit down and sort of readjust some things, I would think.
You're actually inside the band. The band really does go all the way up to 160 something. This was just, these numbers were from the fiscal note, and those tend to be traditionally low when they're writing fiscal notes.
Okay, so what you're saying is, knowing the band, if we get an executive director that's not at the numbers in the fiscal note, we have the latitude to go up? Or do we have to stay within the fiscal note?
No, you have to stay within your budget, but you're not married to that $100,000
But we have to find it someplace so we stay within the balance that's there, right?
That's right. That's correct.
Okay.
That's right. But it's still within the band.
Okay.
The band for DOHR, that is.
Got it.
Okay. Next slide, Drew.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So here's a couple of the other fiscal note assumptions that were baked into that. The first is that you all would end up contracting back with departments for HR, IT, financial, and other support services. Basically, we're very large and do this for a lot of different divisions. The Charter School Commission as a 10-person entity is much smaller, and business-wise ends up being more incidental to our overall ability. It's not a whole lot of supply orders that you'll be putting through. Also wanted to include that the estimated rent facilities, this was benchmarked to using the state board, but was around $100,000 when we looked at that a couple of years ago when the law was passing. Also assumed that the commission would meet quarterly and that travel costs, depending on where it was, would add up to be about $10,000. I did want to also just make the explicit flag that because the Charter School Commission assumed that it would contract back for HR, IT, financial, just for scale, that if you did not want to end up doing that, you would end up needing to use some of those positions to do bookkeeping, financial, HR type things. I will say the state board, which is formally administratively attached to the department, uses the department's fiscal services for a lot of these items. It just ends up being simpler. And that was all the major points that I had. I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Any commissioner have a question?
Go ahead.
Hey, Tom, this is Eddie.
Yes.
So under the fiscal note, it made the assumption we would meet quarterly. However, in this first year, as we laid out in the last full meeting we were at, we're probably going to have more than just 4 meetings in this first year. Is that going to throw us over budget in that line item?
It depends on a lot of things. How long the pandemic lasts, how much you make use of online meetings versus face-to-face meetings, who's traveling and how far. Your state rate for hotels is always going to be your state rate for hotels. I believe you'll stay within that budget. I do.
Okay.
Remember, 3 of your members, if you're meeting in Middle Tennessee, won't travel at all. I mean, at some point, 3 members are not traveling, no matter where you're meeting. Is my point, because it's local. Any other questions or processing from committee members? Tess, could you speak a little bit to just the state board's experience with using the department for some of those contracted functions and what the benefits might be for that?
Sure. So as Drew was mentioning, the state board uses the department because we are formally administratively tied to the department for functions such as human resources. So we don't have an HR director on the State Board of Education. All of our human resources in terms of onboarding of staff, any kind of position classification, payments, et cetera, go through the Department of Education. They handle all of our actual payment of invoices. So we submit our payments. They actually process them from an accounting point of view and pay the vendors through finance and administration. They handle all of our IT needs. So similar to what Rick was saying, anytime we have to order equipment, we're doing that through the Department of Education. I think why it has been beneficial to us is that we're able to leverage the scale and knowledge of the Department of Education with a relatively small agency of the state board. We do not have to staff, an IT person, an HR person. et cetera. And so it's been able to stretch our dollars further than if we had to staff those individual positions.
So Eddie, let me ask you and Derwin, if I may. I mean, having worked with other things like this and looking at, say, in colleges and universities where they clearly can pool a lot of what I call the backroom services. I mean, I tend to think that makes a pretty good sense for us as we start out. You all sort of feel the same way? I think Derwin, I didn't, but if nod your head if you would.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I was just making sure Derwin wasn't going to jump in there. Yeah, I mean, I think, especially considering the mode we're in right now with so few in-person meetings and especially with in-state government, just a lot of people having to work from home, the more we can rely on expertise that already exists, I think we're going to be better off.
Yeah, that's great. I just wanted to ask that, Amity, because I think that's, having seen the deck and that recommendation, I was glad to see it in there.
So in your next commission meeting, Tom, that will be a formal recommendation and vote. Because you're not administratively attached to the Department of Education in legislation, everybody that discussed this issue felt it would be better if the commission took a formal vote to utilize the department for those services.
Thank you.
So we'll make sure that's on the end of April agenda.
So Eddie, do you, Derwin, have any other questions for Drew before we thank him for his presentation to us, and we also thank Rick? Anything else for them?
No, I just appreciate both of you coming in.
Thank you all so much, Drew. Appreciate it. Thank you for the deck, because it was great to have that to work from. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Rick.
With that, next on our agenda is a discussion about hiring of the executive director.
Yep.
Let me share with other commissioners that Amity asked me to be one of the reviewers of the search firms. I did that, and asking to have that so that there was that input, and I got a sense going in of the type of firms that they'd identified and the expertise. So I just want to share that with you all so you knew that. And with that, Amity, I'm going to turn the agenda over to you.
You bet. So we had 3 respondents to the RFA for a search firm. They were scored internally and externally by commission members, DOE staff, and state board staff. And the winner was McPherson and Jacobs. They also happened to be the winner for the RFA for the ASD superintendent. I did not know that until actually after they were scored. So genuine coincidence and very competitive. Tom and I have since had a conversation with the Tennessee recruiter as well as their CEO. They feel confident that they can deliver a slate of candidates to the commission by May 15th for consideration and the scheduling of the beginning interviews. Their contract is not signed yet. As soon as it is executed, we will start with setting them loose on garnering the advertisement and a slate and creating that slate of candidates. And then we'll also start working on interview questions and an interview rubric, which was a deliverable in their contract as well. If everything goes as scheduled, you could have an executive director in place by the end of June, which was the goal. I think that we need to be realistic and understand that we are still in a pandemic environment and may be so for some time. And so the commission needs to be eyes wide open that it may be, in all reality, late July or early August as a plan B.
Amity, let me add one point if I may. I asked Amity after we had our call last week, were they waiting until the contract got signed? The best part was having done work with the state before and understanding, the process when, she shared with me that they already are out starting to identify people that they look this job. So I wanted to share that with other committee members here because I was glad to see they already taken that initiative, which potentially keeps us on track, but we'll see.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we did not ask them to do that because we would not do so without an executed contract. But as a search firm, as you can imagine, they're always collecting resumes and putting talent on the bench. So looking forward to seeing what they produce for us. I think that the thing that I need to flag for this particular committee is that as soon as they provide the deliverable of a rubric and interview questions, that we will need to advertise and meet again so that you could review that rubric and those interview questions, and we can finalize that as they are also creating the slate of candidates. So those two tasks would happen concurrently. So that will be the gist of your next meeting.
So, and I assume we would be able to look at those in advance of our meeting, so we have a chance to review them. Then when we get together, to then sort of hone it down, as you said, to exactly the.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay.
That's right. Also, if the committee will remember, during your full meeting, the commission directed Tennessee Department of Education staff to also identify contracted staff to support the executive director and to support the committees. We did release an RFA for that. We had 3 respondents. We had 1 high scorer, and that was Chris Reynolds. The other 2 scorers were significant points behind the highest scorer. So we've awarded 1 RFA to Chris Reynolds, who is on the call today, and his contract is currently in the process of being executed. We are only going to award 1 contract at this time, given the current state that we were working on. I will be honest, it would be very difficult for me to onboard 2 contractors in a pandemic environment where our daily work is also a little more complicated in the department. Also, the second and third applicants were significantly scored lower than Chris, and so there is enough of a disparity in scores that I've recommended that we only hire 1 contractor at this time. And as soon as we get out of this pandemic and Chris has the opportunity to assess what the needs are above and beyond what he's able to manage, we will publish a second RFA for a more focused body of work. I hope I didn't lose you all in that very lengthy monologue and explanation. But I was going to ask Chris to introduce himself and say hello.
Thank you, Amity. Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Reynolds. It's a pleasure to be on the call with you, and I look forward to supporting your work and the Commission's work and through Amity's leadership. I am a native Tennessean, and I live in Nashville.
So, Chris, this is Tom. May I ask you just share a little more of your background with the with our committee members, if you would?
I'd be happy to. I began my career as a certified public accountant and did that for a number of years, and then decided it was time to be a middle school teacher. And so I taught middle school for a few years, and then eventually pursued a dream of opening charter schools to serve kids that were very similar to the kids that I had taught, but I felt the kids that I had taught didn't always have the proper opportunity to leverage their unique gifts. And so I wanted to open schools that would serve kids much like the ones that I had taught previously. And so for the last almost 15, approaching 20 years now, I've had the good fortune of opening charter schools in 4 different states and leading 2 different charter management organizations, one of which is Lead Public Schools in Nashville that operates charter schools both under MNPS and the ASD. And so I'm well informed about the charter school landscape in Tennessee, as well as other states, and the importance of, a supportive and high expectations authorizing function as it relates to supporting and running high performing charter schools. How's that?
Great, thank you very much. Any committee member have any questions for Chris? Okay, Amity, thank you much. I'll turn back to you.
Thank you. And then just segueing into that, some of the last last spot on our agenda, just around the operational functions prior to the ED hire. So as Rick mentioned, I am in the process of completing the space use form to set up an office for 10 people. I've requested 3 offices, as well as the need for meeting space or conference rooms. And that is how Davy Crockett was identified on the 5th floor, which is the same floor as the State Board of Education, which really we could not ask for a more ideal circumstance, to be honest with you, to have them so close by. And then starting to compile necessary readings, steps, runs of shows, sort of the kitchen sink of onboarding for the executive director. Tess will be extraordinarily helpful in that space, and she's doing a large portion of this work already, so that as you all identify and hire an executive director, we are able to onboard them as quickly as possible to the work and just to the space of state government. So picture onboarding is everything from soup to nuts, from how do you get your email address to how do you do appeals in the Tennessee context for charter schools. So hoping to create a very thorough document for that new executive director. And then we'll be working with Chris and Alan and their committee in the next couple weeks about forming the SMART goals for the executive director, understanding that that probably falls in the governance space as well, and bringing that to the commission for review as well. And that's really what we've been up to since we last saw each other. I would say special thanks to Tom, who has just been a great thought partner in moving the work and staying on top of things, and certainly to Tess and Angie, who have just been great in preparing for the next meeting, next week, committee meeting, and Chanel, who's taken on the review of rules that the committee will be reviewing and then bringing forward to the commission at the end of April. So things are moving, even though you might not see them moving. We're getting there. And Derwin's volume still is not working, so that is why he has been so quiet. He's texting me.
I was wondering if he might have laryngitis, as he has not said anything.
Technical errors. I've had a great time with WebEx these last 10 days. I'm typically a master in this platform, but I've just been flying so fast and low with my clicks at my keyboard. I've done all sorts of interesting things in my WebEx account, some of which you've been subject to, so I apologize for that.
And let me, Cass, I see you here. Let me thank you, because Amity's kept me very apprised of the work that you've been doing, and others, in the office. So thank you, and we really do appreciate you all helping us get set up, even during this time where your world is sort of turned upside down too. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So are there any other questions or comments that a committee member has at this point? If not, I will. Yes.
I've got one quick question. So, Amity, on the office space in the Davy Crockett building, how move-in ready is that, or how much is going to have to be looked at being done to get it move-in ready?
It's very move-in ready. It already has cubicles in a lot of the spaces, but we will also have the opportunity to draw out how the floor plan, suggested floor plan, and they'll do that for us. Okay. Tess, if you could just provide context, how long did it take your staff to move from the DOE tower, Andrew Johnson, to Davy Crockett?
Absolutely. So the reason we identified Davy Crockett as the new location for the state board was because there were very minimal things that had to occur. So Commerce and Insurance moved a lot of their staff to alternative workspace, so they really consolidated their footprint. So there are 3 floors currently in the Davy Crockett building, which are full office, full cubicle, have painting on the walls, photos are hung, but are just currently not occupied. And so I would say, we put up our logo, we put up some pictures, some signage, but for the most part, it was move-in ready. And once we had identified the spot and signed everything, we were able to move in within 2 weeks. So I think that it is an ideal location for the commission. Additionally, it is very close to the Tennessee Department of Education and very close to the General Assembly. which, as you all know, will be two key places for the commission and the commission staff.
And as soon as our office buildings are open again, you are all welcome to come and take a look at the 5th floor.
Eddie, that answer?
Yeah.
Good.
And
So with that, if there's no other questions, Amity, well done.
Hey, 1 down, 2 to go this month. April's a busy month for the Charter Commission.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
well, since Durbin made a motion, I'm second.
We can wave.
Thank you all, and it's good to see you. Stay well, and Amity, thank you, and thanks to everybody else that's here with us, and we'll see you pretty soon again.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.